Well, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, fellow safety practitioners. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar from the Manchester and North West Districts, Sections and Branch. I'm the branch chair, Chris Nagg, and I welcome you all and thanks for giving up your time this afternoon. As always, we have an interesting speaker for you, and we're really looking forward to the session. Just to reiterate the instructions at the beginning, life vests are under the seat. Remember to pull down firmly on the oxygen mask and put your mask on first before attending to anybody else's. But if you do have any questions for our speaker, if you'd like to put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, I or Stuart, the branch secretary, will be posing those questions on your behalf to our speaker after the session. So to move on very, very swiftly, it is absolutely our pleasure to welcome Heather Beach, the Director of the Healthy Work Company. She's going to talk to us today about empathy and emotional intelligence. And just having a quick chat with her before the session now, I think this is going to be really interesting and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So Heather, if you'd like to share your screen.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's so lovely to be here today. I can't tell you how much I think the branches do a brilliant job, and I've been fortunate to speak at a few of them recently, and I'm always really overwhelmed by what you do. I think you really are the jewel in IOSH's crown. Before I start, I really want to acknowledge what you have all been doing through this period, because it has been a real strain and an awful lot of work for health and safety professionals. I know. I do feel, however, that ultimately we are seeing a tipping point in perhaps the appreciation of the profession, which has been engendered by some of the work you've had to do through this period. So I'm hoping that ultimately this will be good, but I know that you are working incredibly, incredibly hard. So I really acknowledge you for that. I think it would be a bit odd if I didn't start today's session by talking a little bit about the situation that we are now in. And I think it's entirely pertinent to this topic. We see a bunch of risks and opportunities. So first of all, we have got unprecedented levels of change. We're constantly going through that yellow stress curve. I don't know if you've seen Peter Kelly from the psychological safety branch of HSE talking ever, but he always shows that stress curve where, we are under stress and then we adjust and then we're under stress and then we adjust. And that curve is going on all the time for us. As human beings, our brains are programmed to detect uncertainty as something of a challenge, and therefore that can get those stress hormones going through our bodies, that adrenaline and cortisol, which actually may not always be good for us long term. Short term, they get us moving, get us motivated. But I don't know about you, but there have been times over the last few months where I've thought, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can be flexible, I can be adaptable. And then all of a sudden you just get really tired with it, don't you? We're seeing all these extremes in individual situations. Some people have really thrived in this period. We ran a survey during lockdown, which showed that a lot of people were actually loving this period. They were able to reconnect with their families. They were not missing having to do a commute anymore. And then equally, we've got people who can't really work from home, or who perhaps are being forced to go back to an office and don't want to go back to an office, or on site and don't want to be on site. So we've got all these extremes in individual situations. I think that for a lot of people, burnout is a bit of a risk right now, and we do need to take care of ourselves and make sure we do take a rest when we need to. We think, and it's an assertion, that the old paradigm relating to work and life is a little bit bust right now. And that's an opportunity for us because it forces us to reassess the way we live, we work, and we interact with each other. And we've got an opportunity to use new technology and insights. And for me, what it does represent is a real opportunity for us to take personal responsibility for our well-being and to understand that emotional intelligence and empathy are real keys for this period, both in dealing with others and in dealing with ourselves. Quite often when we stood in front of rooms of people in the past, we would talk to them about perhaps thinking about or planning for their happiness in some way or their well-being. And there was almost like a blank set of looks, like if you have to plan for it, it's somehow inauthentic. It should just happen to you, shouldn't it? But actually, I think we're finding through this period that some of us have to be a lot more proactive about creating those opportunities for ourselves to look after our own well-being, and be a bit more proactive with that. In times of stress and uncertainty, we've got these stress risk factors. We are probably, most of us, trying to do the same amount and more with fewer resources. We've got a pressure to perform. We're more afraid of failure, of job loss, and there is a sense of fear for our loved ones as well. You know, will they get the infection, or perhaps will they lose their work? Even if our job as health and safety professionals may be pretty well regarded and safe right now, perhaps our loved ones may not be able to keep their job. The outcome of these stress risk factors is that our stress hormones are turned on a lot more than they normally are. That can result in frayed tempers. We might rest less because we have so much work to do. We might sleep less because we have an awful lot on our mind. And we may end up being less curious, which is really important for a health and safety professional, isn't it? To be curious about why people are behaving in a particular way, and more defensive, perhaps. The impact of that is that it can lead to burnout and other health issues. It leads us to become less of a learning organisation. And I'm sure that most of you right now are really clear that being a learning organisation is so important. And we can become, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, or on social media platforms and elsewhere, we can become very polarized and very confrontational. I see this all the time. And although I immediately think, oh, that's not very nice, actually what I understand is the background of it is fear. The background is uncertainty. So that can come out as anger from other people. So we are going to talk, this is Stuart Bailey's wonderful title that he came up with. He rang me one day and he said, Heather, I know what we're going to call it. We're going to call it Equanimity and Beyond. So I thought, this is really nice, actually. What a nice idea to actually bring together the concept of emotional intelligence and empathy together with the concept of resilience. And there are so many connections there. If you don't know me, I'm Heather Beach, and I was ex-director at UBM. So I ran SHP Magazine, the IOSH Conference, Safety and Health Expo, and the Barber Service. I'm sure none of you are old enough to remember Barber Microfiche, but I was actually there when we had the microfiche and then put it onto CD-ROM and then online. I'm the founder of Women in Health and Safety, which now has about 2,500 members. And 4 years ago, I decided actually I don't want to have a bureaucratic corporate career for the rest of my life. I want to do my own thing. And what I'm really fascinated about is how people thrive in life with whatever gets thrown at them. How do we get the best out of life that we possibly can? Understanding that life isn't always great and there's light and dark in it. How do we make sure that we always get the best that we can out of it? So as a result of that, I set up Healthy Work Company. I am studying a master's in applied positive psychology, also organizational development theory called relational organizational gestalt. I'm an NLP practitioner, a Chartered Institute of Management diploma, Cranfield strategy and culture change. And I've been involved in your profession for 25 years, and I've seen an enormous amount of change in both the way of being and the reputation of the profession in that period. We've been fortunate enough to work with some very large businesses, mostly UK based, but also some global businesses during the pandemic now, because we can obviously do it all via webinar, which is fantastic. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at three things here today. We're going to look at the value of emotional intelligence. Why is it something that has been put into the blueprint? Why is it something that health and safety professionals really need to have in spades? How does emotional intelligence link to resilience? How does it lead to equanimity and beyond? And then finally, oh my goodness, I don't think I've got any. How do I find some emotional intelligence? In case any of you out there don't, I'm sure you all do, but you may be able to pick up one or two hints. You never know. So in my time working in your profession, I have seen a massive shift in seniority, in skills requirements, and very much in the focus. So when I first joined, you see the man with the clipboard there, it was very much about compliance. And I was really keen in my capacity as running SHP, the conference, Safety and Health Expo, to support the movement of the profession from compliance to one of engagement. And I can really see that now it is there. There's so much happening that's good to see. You know, some of the things that IOSH have done recently, creating the Young Leaders Forum, some of the sessions that we see running, the creation of the blueprint involving things like emotional intelligence, empathy, listening skills, all of these are so important. When we started the business, actually we were working with Anna Keane. Anna has ACRE Frameworks, which is psychometric testing for health and safety professionals. And from that, she generated requirements for training in influencing skills, and we were running influencing skills for health and safety professionals. Now, what I really had that light bulb moment when I was running that training was just how difficult this role is for you. So you have not only got a role in which you need to have very great technical understanding of the topic, but also you've got to be master influencers, because quite often people don't want to hear the message that you have, either up or your peer group or below you. It's a really, really difficult position to be in. And I'm absolutely in awe of you for taking it on. And I have seen such a shift in the way that health and safety professionals are being. Also, they've gone up the agenda. They're now much more in leadership positions because the board are understanding the requirements. They're understanding the benefits to them for having health and safety there too. This is a quote by the most famous author on emotional intelligence ever so far, Daniel Goleman. He's been the writer on this topic. There are other people, but he was probably the first. And he said, CEOs are hired for their intellect and business expertise and fired for a lack of emotional intelligence. You could substitute in there health and safety professionals, because quite often when people don't know what they're looking for exactly, they sort of want to hire somebody who has sort of the right qualifications, but maybe they don't understand too well what's required. They might not look for that emotional intelligence in that person. They might just look for the right set of qualifications, the right level of membership of IOSH. And actually, where you're going to be successful, not only just ticking the boxes, is if you can show that emotional intelligence, those influencing skills in your roles. So what is it? You know, why might I think I might need to work on my emotional intelligence, or my what is also called EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence quotient, like IQ. So if, for example, you often find yourself getting angry and venting, that can show that you are basically not able to create that space between something happening and you reacting to it and then throwing fuel on the fire. So some people think venting is good. Actually, it's generally not. Most of the research shows that it actually just makes it worse. So you may, if you don't have much emotional intelligence or EQ, you might find yourself often getting angry and venting. This one would be very tricky in your situation. If you find it difficult to persuade those around you to a point of view, that might mean that you need to work on your emotional intelligence. And one thing that I saw very early on an awful lot in the profession was, I know I'm right, people should just listen to me. I still see it now and then, but nothing like as much as I used to. It's like, this is what the legislation says, this is what the standard says, just get on with it. And that actually doesn't necessarily work. It might be right, but it doesn't always work. And what we're looking at is workability. How can we make sure that our message is not only put out there correctly, but received correctly by that person, so they actually want to do something about what you're saying to them. Another sign, which is quite an interesting one, is that you might find it difficult to describe what you're feeling. So for example, if you just say, I feel bad, rather than I'm feeling really angry or upset or irritated, or you can't be really granular about describing that emotion, that may mean that you are not as in touch with what's really going on for you. And this links to this subject of self-awareness, which we're going to come up with a lot in the future here. If you get easily offended, you can't take feedback on the chin. We all struggle from time to time. Or you hold grudges. though that again can show a lack of emotional intelligence. And then finally, we have this one here, a dead giveaway. Now, I haven't been to a do recently at all, where this has ever been the case. But in my early career, when I was a young thing, and I used to go to do network do, sometimes I would have somebody talking at me for a very long time. And I was young and polite. I didn't know how to get away. And so I often disappeared to the loo. So I'm sure that doesn't apply to anybody on this call. But, you know, just a bit of a giveaway if that happens to you. So what is emotional intelligence? Okay, it is combined lots and lots of qualities, but the fundamental thing is to understand yourself really well. So be really self-aware, to know who you are, know your strengths and weaknesses, and know, you know, what you like and what you don't like. That sounds fairly straightforward, but it's actually a lifelong journey, in my opinion. The second one is emotion regulation. Now, I mentioned this earlier when I talked about venting and getting angry. So emotion regulation is probably quite a big challenge for us right now as a society. We saw it prior to the pandemic with people, you know, getting very upset and getting very angry about things, and being on top of being able to regulate our emotions is really important, both for our mental health and also to show that we have emotional intelligence. It's empathy, which is obviously being able to understand the other person's point of view, being able to walk in their shoes a little bit. And it is also social skills. And they are also, that together with likability, are important factors for influencing. Your EQ is the level of your ability to understand other people, what motivates them, and how to work cooperatively with them. Now, for you in your positions, this is where I take my hat off to you, because this is really difficult, because you might be dealing with the finance director who has a completely different communication style and a completely different set of motivators to the CEO. So the finance director might just be interested in how much it's going to cost them and how much it's going to add to the bottom line. The CEO might be interested in their next promotion, in being able to be seen to be doing the right thing. And then you might be talking to the ops person who's completely different again. And then you might be talking to people in the teams who may just be interested in doing the best job they can, or going home safe, or whatever it is. But understanding where somebody's coming from and being able to speak to that motivation in the way that they want to be communicated with is really what we're talking about here. So let's start with this whole picture of self-awareness. So research has shown that people with a more accurate self-perception tend to perform better in the workplace, because more self-aware leaders are able to tailor their style to the situation at hand. So if you don't know that you are more comfortable being this type of a communicator or that type of a communicator, how can you also know the other person's style and then try to actually address their style within yours? So I know, for example, that I am not very good when it comes to facts and figures. I am much better when it comes to, you know, I don't know, enrolling or influencing. I'm not very good at facts and figures. So when I am having a meeting with someone that I know is really keen on facts and figures, I have to make sure I have all my facts beside me, or a piece of paper to give them, something which actually lays that all out for them. And you might be the opposite. So it might be that you have to work on that element before you go in to do the meeting. It's a greater understanding of your reactions and your motivation as well. It allows you to manage yourself better as well. You need to know what your triggers are. What types of things make you angry and upset? I discovered only last year, I'm 51 years old, right? And I only just discovered that I am a perfectionist. So what that means is I have really high standards for myself, really high standards for the people that work with me. And I believe that others have really high expectations of me. Now that I know that, I can actually look at that and say, actually, where does that serve me? And then equally, where do I perhaps need to look at involving some self-compassion or some understanding that nobody's perfect, we're all human beings. Until I uncovered that a year ago, that was just there and it was running me and I had no idea about it. now I know it, I have some choice about it. So that's really what being self-aware gives you, is some choice about your reactions and the ability to adapt your behavior, improve your relationships, and grow yourself as a person. Once we understand ourselves, we begin to understand diversity as well, that everybody has a different opinion, that we all come from a different place. So the way I was brought up, the way you were brought up, depending on what country we were born in, what religion we have, we are all going to believe certain things. And my favorite is when we talk about common sense, because common sense doesn't exist unless we all actually share the same knowledge. And I remember somebody once saying, oh, health and safety is just common sense. It may well be. Once you know it, it isn't common sense until you know it. So understanding that people are different, that we all have a different frame of reference that we're coming from, depending on all sorts of things, actually allows us to be a bit more open and allows us to work more effectively with people, rather than just going, oh my goodness me, that person's a pain. I can't work with them, because they operate very differently to the way that I operate. Emotion regulation, we mentioned earlier, this is generally used as a term to describe a person to effectively manage and respond to an emotional experience. Now, we all have emotion regulation strategies. They're mostly used subconsciously. So it might be an effective strategy, or it might be an ineffective one. So some are not that healthy, shall I say, rather than ineffective. So an unhealthy one might be that you go and drink a lot, for example, or it might be that you vent and get angry. Mine is generally to go around talking to the world and his wife, everyone that will listen, which, you know, is okay. It sort of works for me. I'm not sure how it works for anybody else, but, you know, that's mine. You'll have your own, but being aware of what it is and being able to self-manage, is because self-awareness and self-mastery are the keys to emotional intelligence fundamentally. Empathy is often described as the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. Now, you don't have to feel that thing yourself. There's two types of empathy. Actually, there are a few, but the cognitive and affective are the most well known. Cognitive is our ability to understand what somebody else is going through. Affective is our taking that onto ourselves, and actually that may be detrimental sometimes, because A, it's upsetting for us, and B, sometimes when you reflect that upset back to the other person, it makes that situation worse. So all we need to do is understand where that person's coming from. Ask lots of questions, be curious, don't take their answers personally. Social skills, well, we all know, don't we, like it or not, social skills are increasingly important in today's workplaces. And how we do that over a screen, well, that's interesting, isn't it? That's to be discovered by all of us, isn't it? But yes, it's as organizational structures become flatter. So when I was working in my corporate career, we were in what we called a matrix managed organization. Some of you will be in those, I'm sure. And it was all about who I knew. And a lot of that, unfortunately, was done in the pub, which, because it was the events industry, that was the way it was. And I had to know the person to go to, who I could ask to do something for me, because although I had nominally 50 people reporting to me, actually I couldn't ask anyone to do anything, because they were reported elsewhere as well. We all have these kinds of situations that we work in, where it's all about influencing, as opposed to doing things with authority in the way perhaps we would have done at the beginning of my career. So emotionally intelligent people are genuinely interested in other people. They're genuinely curious. They don't just ask the questions in order to look good. They are genuinely interested. So how can you develop your curiosity? They're really good at active listening. We're going to be looking at active listening in a moment when we get on to how you're going to develop this. They're aware of their strengths and weaknesses. They're able to let go of the past and not worry too much about the future. They're comfortable talking to friends and strangers. They show integrity and authenticity. So important these days. I think, is that it? And they're able to tell a good story and engage. Now, as health and safety professionals, I imagine that some of you will have attended storytelling courses. Stories are so important in influencing in health and safety. And I've heard some absolutely brilliant ones where people tell them in short, sharp way, where you're actually really moved by that story. So do I have self-awareness? Well, here's some ways to find out. Do you often reflect on your thoughts and feelings? Do you enjoy trying to understand where I'm coming from? Why do I do that thing? Why did I do that thing? Interested in why other people behave the way that they do. Value opportunities to evaluate your behavior. Understand why people behave the way they do. When I'm feeling uncomfortable, I can easily name those feelings. We talked about that earlier. Or am I just feeling bad? And I usually know why I'm feeling the way I do. That might take a bit of exploration. Sometimes with feelings, something can just feel in our body like it's wrong. And we have to go and say, right, why do I feel that way? What thought has created that feeling? And then we can dig into why we're feeling that way and then try and understand it better. So what is the link between emotional intelligence and resilience? How do these, as Stuart Bailey beautifully put it, lead to equanimity and beyond? Resilience. So resilience, what's the reason for resilience, and the reason why we all know that it's so important right now is the organizations that are going to survive this awful period are going to be flexible, adaptable, and they're going to have well people in them. They're going to be experimenting and learning from failure without fear of comeback and taking it personally. Resilient people help to create a resilient organization. We know that teams where psychological safety is present are safer. They're also, according to Google's Project Aristotle, more connected, more engaged, and more productive. We know that your mission as health and safety professionals is to create the best conditions for a healthy, safe organization. You might not put on the end in which people are happy, but you can always add that as a bonus on the end. Oh, I can't move my slide on. What's happened? Oh, there we are. Right. So resilience and emotional intelligence, how do they go together? So Daniel Goleman, the god of emotional intelligence, says a person who is self-aware, socially adept and empathetic will be able to survive and thrive on the other side of a life crisis because they have the social and relational skills to be able to handle unexpected and unfortunate circumstances. They know how to advocate for themselves, to problem solve, and to seek support when they need it most. Now, the good news when it comes to resilience is that we all have resilience there. We all have inbuilt elements of resilience, but we may not have had to use it very much. When we start to use it and when we start to inquire into how we are going to get better at it, we can build it. There are tools that we can build ourselves to improve our own resilience. And that is so important in the world that we're in today and the world that we are going into. It's so important that we understand how to do that for ourselves. The other benefit to emotionally intelligent individuals is that they know how to provide empathy to those around them who may also be affected by crisis or dire situation. We know that our managers are going to be so important when it comes to managing the situations of the people within their teams. Every person within their team is an individual with their own set of circumstances, their own concerns, their own extremes, and they need to be able to talk to their manager. We need really good listeners as managers right now. So the quality of being emotionally intelligent and empathetic just moves the top when it comes to our managers and, in my belief, our health and safety professionals. So how do they link? Well, self-awareness is the bedrock for both. If you are self-aware, you're going to be more resilient. If you are emotionally intelligent, if you're self-aware, you're going to be more emotionally intelligent. Another aspect which links them is social connections support both. The primary researcher into resilience is a lady called Anne Marston, and she wrote a book called Ordinary Magic. And she studied for a longitudinal study, so over a number of years, she studied some children, and she discovered that the most resilient children were those who had primary carer who looked after them, who was there to support them when they needed it. And we are, for both emotional intelligence and resilience, we need to be good and have those social connections. We need to be able to reach out to someone when we're struggling, have someone to reach out to in the first place, because otherwise, well, nobody's alone, but we need to have that in our lives to ensure that we are able to be resilient and emotionally intelligent. Existing literature provides evidence of a connection between emotional intelligence and resilience, both concepts being adversely related to perceived stress. Now, what do I mean by perceived stress, and what do I mean by that last statement? So let's have a look at what perceived stress is, shall we? So first of all, I'm sure you've all seen the stress curve. You've all seen the fact that we need a little bit of challenge and pressure to get us going. We ideally want to be at the top of that curve where we're in flow, and quite often we can end up with too much. We can get overwhelmed, or we can get given that thing to do which is really, really difficult for us. We can't really do very easily. We don't have the support for it, and then we end up down the other end of that and going into anxiety and struggling and overwhelm. So what is perceived stress? Well, this is a theory by Lazarus, and Lazarus says that stress is basically, it's not a thing, it's our reaction to the thing. And we are all very different in how we react. So I find that my biggest stressor is when my tax return arrives. Look, it's not my biggest stressor, but it's just a great example for you. I hate it when my tax return arrives. I always think to myself, as soon as that envelope comes to the door, that horrible brown envelope, I won't be able to add it up. I won't be able to find the right paperwork. I won't have enough money in the bank. Now, for you, your tax return might be just a thing that you just tick off your list and just do, just like that. You might not get sweaty. You might not go red. You might not get tongue-tied and a dry mouth because of it. That's what happens to me. I'm sure many things that that other people do, you'd think, I couldn't do that. I find that way too stressful. I've been training the ITV news readers all week. And I think a lot of people would really struggle with a job like that they do. But it's not for them. They take it in their stride. As human beings, when a stressful situation comes towards us, or perceived to be a stressful situation, we ask ourselves, is this situation threatening, harmful, or challenging? And can I cope with it? Now, that is all done in a nanosecond. We're not even aware that we're making those decisions, but that's what we're doing. And our ability to cope with that stressor will be impacted by so many things that day. Have we slept well? Have we eaten the right things? Have we got the right support around us? Are we feeling a bit overwhelmed? Are we feeling insecure that particular day? So this is perceived stress, and our ability to be resilient and our ability to be emotionally intelligent will partially depend on our ability to step back from that and understand what's going on in our mind. So I know, right, okay, calm down. That's just my tax return. I can speak to someone who can help me. Actually, I do know where the folder is, and calm down about it. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at perceived stress, and we're looking at the fact that there's a link between emotional intelligence and resilience, which is adversely related to perceived stress. So we will get less perceived stress if we are emotionally intelligent and resilient. So now we're on to the final bit here. I think I'm struggling. I maybe don't have any, or I haven't got enough. How on earth do I get some of this emotional intelligence and empathy that I now need and IOSH tells me I need? So what do I do? First of all, we want to look at self-awareness. How can we develop more self-awareness? How can that person that I hid in the toilet from know that that's the effect they're having on somebody? Then we're going to look at emotion regulation. How can we get better at that? And then finally, listening skills. So first of all, developing self-awareness. So one of the things that we probably need to do here is be a little bit more observant of other people's reactions. It's very hard. I can't see any of you today. I have no idea what your reaction is. Normally, when I'm on a Zoom call with my team, or maybe I'm training 20 or 30 people, I can see their faces and I can see how they're responding to what I'm saying. They might be smiling, they might be laughing, but that's sort of easier to tell. It's not as easy as it is to tell in person, obviously. And it is quite a strain when we're on Zoom all the time to be able to pick those reactions up. but being more attuned to what people are doing around you. So what their face is saying, what their body language is saying, which way their feet are pointing. So for example, you go up to somebody at a networking do, they don't point their feet towards you, they're pointing away. They perhaps don't want you joining in their conversation. So being aware of their body language and embracing that intuition that says this isn't going well or this is going really well. You'll get those various signals which you may be interpreting internally, but just embrace those. Step back from yourself. Why did I think that? Why did I do that? What story did I tell myself? And then writing it down is always a helpful one. So journaling is a great way, or talking to somebody about it, but just writing it all down can allow you to just have a look and interpret what's true, what's not true, but trying to step back and understand why we behave the way we behave. Oh, I behave that way. I'm a perfectionist because my mum and dad are perfectionists and they brought me up that way. Thank you, mum and dad. But it's also served me as well. But it's just being aware of what drives you and where you can link that to. And then again, as we said earlier, once you know that, you have a bit of a choice about it. Obviously, there's the obvious one, doing personality profiles of some sort. I don't mean the ones that you find in the magazines, but, something like your MBTI or your DISC Thomas profile, something like that. Because when you know my preference, and it is only a preference, it shouldn't be a fixed view about yourself, but my preference is to operate in this way, then also you might understand that somebody else's preference is to operate differently, and you can then adjust your style accordingly to ensure that you're matching with them. Also, I am absolute fan of counselling or therapy or anything that you need to support you in this area, or reading about the brain, about the way human beings work. So you will have heard, I'm sure it's said on other sessions with IOSH, but, health and safety people should be reading business books. They should also be reading psychology books. And a lot of, I'm sure, successful safety people have started from a psychology background. And then there's this thing about developing a space between what happens and our reaction to it. So we talked about this venting earlier, and we have this idea that, well, I feel something, so I need to express that feeling. But actually, sometimes developing that space, breathing a little bit through, for example, something like mindfulness is a better idea. Just briefly, I'm sure you all know something about the stress response system already, but this is really important to understand when it comes to emotion regulation. So we don't want to lose our temper. We don't want to get angry in a situation where we don't, we don't want that to occur. So understanding that, what happens when our amygdala gets hijacked. So this is, again, an expression that Daniel Goleman came up with, but we've got that little gland in our brain, part of our limbic system, which starts off our stress response system, which gets that adrenaline and cortisol going through our brains, which narrows our focus, heightens our blood pressure, increases our heart rate, our mouth goes dry, we breathe all over the place. Is actually really important to us, because we need to understand that this is going on and it's a physical process, and how can we actually start to draw back from that to make sure that we are not throwing fuel on the fire. So things like breathing, stepping back, noticing an emotion, these types of things are what we need to be looking at. The amygdala hijack, as I mentioned earlier, this is when our tongue gets tied. We're not our best self in that situation, and we need to ideally be our best self, remind ourselves of what value we're trying to bring in this situation, which isn't served by getting angry. So how we handle that in the moment stress, there's a lovely diagram from somebody called Plutchik. I'm just going to put those first things up there first of all, because the reality is that this all might happen at one time. It might happen, breathing might need to happen first. So my daughter has been recently struggling with anxiety, and she gets herself into such a panic that she cries, she hyperventilates. And so at that point, we do box breathing. So we breathe in for 4, wait for 4, breathe out for 4, wait for 4. and just breathe until she's calm enough. And then when she's calm enough, then we can look at labeling those emotions. Labeling those emotions enables you to re-engage your prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of your brain. And being quite granular, as Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion looks at here, being quite granular about what we call that. So it's not just a bit of anger, it's loathing or it's rage. These are important because then that enables us to better re-engage that prefrontal cortex. Focusing on the present moment is one that I use a lot. So obviously this is a stressful period for a lot of people, myself included on occasion, and I have to remind myself, I'm here right now, I'm well, I've got my house, I've got food in the fridge, I've got people that love me. Reminding yourself of the present moment, taking perspective. Will this matter in 6 months, 9 months time? Is this really worth losing my temper over, or is this just a momentary aberration? And then remembering who I am and what value I want to be bringing to a situation, which isn't necessarily bringing anger to it. Finally, we're just going to look briefly at listening skills. You will know mostly we listen to respond. So mostly when someone's talking to us, we're thinking about what we're going to say in response to what they're saying. We talk about a structure called A, B, C. A for awareness, B for be present, C for co-create a plan. When we're talking about someone that's struggling, B is for be present. So why are we generally not present? Because we're busy thinking. We're busy thinking about what we're going to say next. We're busy thinking about what they're saying. We're thinking about our opinions. We've got too many distractions. We're thinking about our own experience and how we're going to relate what they say back to our own experience. We're thinking about how we're going to solve their problem for them because it's really so easy if only they did exactly what we suggested. We're thinking about our preconceptions about that person. We know them. We know what they're going to come out with. We've seen it before. Our judgments. Human beings are judging machines. We can't help ourselves. And then we've also just got way too much to do some of the time, haven't we? And oh my goodness me, they're taking up another half an hour of my time and I just don't have that half hour to spare. So how do we get over these? Well, we recognize that's what we're doing. So we recognize, oh my goodness me, I'm judging. All right, I'm coming up with my solution again, aren't I? That's interesting. And then we practice some of these tools. So we might want to use body language that shows that we're listening. We might want to use comfortable eye contact, not staring at them like Jack Nicholson from The Shining. This is an important one. Might want to summarize. So what you're saying is that if I were to do X, Y, Z for you, then you'd feel okay. And then we could do A, B, C. Is that a fair summary? Something like that. Use silence. I know it's uncomfortable, but actually it can really help the person get more off their chest, more of what they want to say. Using understanding noises or, oh, that must be really difficult, or some way that show that we are actually listening. Asking clarifying open questions, because we don't need to have a solution a lot of the time. A lot of the time people just want to be heard. I just want you to get it. I just want you to understand, and then my problem may not go away, but it may get a lot smaller if I've really felt heard. So here we go, the last couple of slides, lessons from today that we've learned. The value of emotional intelligence. It will help you persuade people. It will help you be more likable and happier. How do these lead to equanimity and beyond? How do they help with resilience? Well, self-awareness is the core concept for both. And then if I don't think I have very much of it, or I want to find some more, aim for more self-awareness, more emotion regulation, and improve your listening skills. Those are the three big things that you can really do, which will make a difference to your emotional intelligence. If anybody's interested, we're starting on the 1st of October with a 6-week program, which is delivered in 6 live 60-minute sessions, which will help your teams come to terms with the way things are today. We're looking at uncertainty, worry, stress, a lot of those mental health and well-being things. It's 50% knowledge delivery and 50% implementation and practical application support. Just let me know if that's of interest to anybody. If it's not, that's absolutely fine. And here's my contact details. If anybody wants to speak to me or give me some feedback or anything else, I'm really happy to hear from you all. And I can just see Chris's lovely face come back up. Chris, did Stuart make it, or is it just you? He didn't make it. He's left you all alone.
He has, unfortunately, and he just says send his apologies. As with many of our safety professional colleagues, we have to react to what's in front of us, and today he's had to react. So he does send his apologies, and I'm sure he'll catch up with you after and watch this session back on the video. Heather, fantastic session. Learned lots, loads of questions, some that we'll try and get through before the end of the session today. One that came to my mind is in terms of emotional intelligence. Is it related to age? Is there some comparison you can make between age and emotional intelligence? Because I've found as I've got older, I've become less bothered by the things that I have to deal with. And hey, he's here. He made it.
Hello, Stuart. Oh, well done. It's lovely to see you. You missed me banging on as well. Well done.
All right, let's just remember we're on a webinar and we are being recorded. So coming back to the question, is this a relationship between age, as you get older, do you get less bothered by some of the things that life throws at you?
Well, obviously, as we get older, generally, we have more experience. We've seen this thing before, and therefore that enables us to develop our resilience a little bit more. Now, that doesn't happen to everybody, because some people will get beaten down by these things that happen to them, and other people will actually get more resilient as they get older. Also, I think that there are certainly opportunities to get more self-aware as we get older as well, if we take them. And it really is down to whether we take them or not. Having said all of that, I do think that there is probably more of an openness and a fashion among younger people to be much more thinking along these lines anyway. Whereas probably, I mean, when I talk to my mum about this stuff, it's absolute news to her. She hasn't heard any of it before. And I suspect that, you know, again, there have been times in history when we have been really interested, and times when we haven't been. So the Greeks, for example, were really hot on a lot of this, and we've forgotten a lot of it. But various generations have picked it up or dropped it. It just hasn't been very fashionable of late, I suspect.
Okay. One of the questions that came in from Hitesh. Heather, how did you choose which courses and studies to undertake in order to move into your field of work? And which order did you start in?
Right. So, Hitesh, I've been interested in this field since I was in my mid-20s, and it wasn't even a thing in those days. I started with a course called the Landmark Forum, which was really a personal development forum. And I did a whole year really with them, learning about, I remember at the time they talked about how to be a better human being. And at the time I was like, what on earth? You know, nobody talked like that in those days, but now we sort of understand it a little bit better. And then 15 years ago, I heard about the move or positive psychology, which was being led by Martin Seligman in the US. And I was like, this is me, this is what I want to be doing. And so as soon as I set my business up, I enrolled on a master's of applied positive psychology.
Brilliant, thank you. Julia Johnson asks, do you have any advice for engaging with passive-aggressive staff?
Oh, Julia, how difficult. I completely empathise. That's an awful situation to be in. I really think so. But so I think a lot of it is about how you feel when you're dealing with them, is trying to put yourself in the best place possible, which might mean giving up some of your preconceptions about how they're going to behave. Because when we go into a conversation already knowing how someone's going to be, then in a sense that's the way the conversation is going to go. Whereas if we start to kind of give up some of our preconceptions, and I think it's just really being curious about why they feel the way they feel, and perhaps being a bit open with them about their impact they have on you as well. It's what gets in the way for all of us is our ego, you know, or we really struggle when I personally struggle with this a lot. So I'm not telling you I'm perfect, but I really struggle when people are passive aggressive, because it really impacts me personally. And I have to really take a lot of deep breaths and say, actually, it's nothing to do with me, it's them. And how can I support them?
Thank you very much. I've got a question here from Catherine Binney. Can you summarise preventative control measures and recommendations for reactive measures that organisations rather than individuals can take?
This is brilliant, Catherine. Thank you for this question. We have mostly focused on proactive interventions from organisations and very little on reactive for individuals. We're actually addressing that now because I think that individuals need some of these skills. We're not taught it at school. We're not taught how to be resilient. We're not taught how to manage our own wellbeing. And so we are actually starting to move into that area right now. However, we believe that well-being sits at the centre of a number of things. The first thing is you as an organisation. So what policies, processes, procedures do you have in place? What culture do you have? And the best thing to do is ask people what they love about working for you, what they hate about working for you. This is probably some kind of traditional stress risk assessment, actually, which obviously we all should be doing organisationally, and we know that very few people do. The second thing is to train your managers. We were having a conversation earlier before we started this webinar about the importance of managers and training your managers on having those important wellbeing conversations, but equally having a better, emotionally intelligent, empathetic way of dealing with their teams is so important, because your organisation, your manager are two of the influences on your wellbeing at work. The third one is train them on themselves, so understanding themselves better, their own resilience. And then when you end up with the reactive measures, you want to be looking at things like your employee assistance program. Is it fit for purpose? Do you use one? If you don't have any AP, you might want to look at regularly getting a counsellor in or something like that, or having an agreement with an online counselling service to support people, particularly at this time.
Excellent. We've got a question in from Sharon Robertson. How do you demonstrate emotional intelligence as one of your key skill sets?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, Sharon. I think the only thing that you can say on that is you could be talking about how you influence a difficult situation or a difficult person. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way. If we're talking about applying for a job or a CV, that type of thing, it's talking about how you influenced, I think.
Brilliant. Scott Presley has asked, what EQ tools are available to educate those in high-risk industries?
Sorry, Scott, I wouldn't know the answer to that. Beyond using an organisation like ours to train, I wouldn't know what else is available.
It's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got a webinar feedback coming up on your screens now. If you don't mind giving us some feedback on today's webinar, I'm sure Heather would be interested in the results, but certainly we are interested in the results. We've been very, very successful recently, and these feedback forms have really been a big part of that, because they tell you what you are enjoying in our webinars and also what you don't like. So we'll keep giving you what you like, always. So if you don't mind just filling that out for us, that would be great. And do we need a few minutes just while that goes off the screen?
Oh, it'll go away automatically with that.
Right. Okay.
Do you want to pick up with the next question, Stu? I think we've time for a couple more.
We got a couple more, right? Okay. I've got one here by Amira Piabakas. Should a toxic workplace, I hope I've pronounced your name right, Amira. Should a toxic workplace be considered as a health hazard? I know toxic workplaces and the employees are so drained that it really affects their performance at work. And I think everybody wants an answer to that one, because we've all been in those kind of workplaces.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I guess it already is in a way. We should be doing a stress risk assessment, an organisational stress risk assessment. It's a legal requirement. We don't do them, but we should be doing them. And that would then identify, this is what we've got, and then we should be looking at mitigation against that. It's fair to say that the HSE haven't really enforced that, although I am informed that they are going to be asking when they inspect, have you got one available? Oops, hold on. Sorry, I just unplugged my speakers there for a sec. There. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I just got overexcited and flapped my arms too much. Sorry about that. The other thing is that if we are reporting stress to the HSE, they will be actually having to respond to that. And then, you know, as an employer, if we're ending up regularly in a tribunal, which, let's face it, if you've got a toxic workplace, that's where you're going to be a lot of the time. Ultimately, we are going to end up seeing we've got a problem. However, I personally believe that if you've got a really toxic workplace, you've tried all you can and you can't do very much about it, you should most definitely leave, because you should find somewhere, an environment in which you can flourish.
Agreed.
Brilliant.
I think the HSC's management standards, the tool I've used before, and
that's the stress risk assessment. Yeah, that is the management standards.
Very good.
Well done if you've used it. It's very good. It's very good. The problem is organisations don't like to use it because it might uncover a can of worms that they don't know that they can deal with. We've done lots of them. We do employee forums as well, and you get some great stories about what people love to working in that organisation. And generally, what you find is that there are 1 or 2 quick fixes that you can put in place, and then generally there's 1 or 2 big nasty things that you just have to communicate more about what you're doing about them, because they can't be fixed overnight.
Thank you so much. I think we're coming to the end of the webinar. Am I right, Chris?
Yes, there are still quite a few questions. What we'll do is we'll grab those and see if we can answer those after directly. There's lots of love on the chat for you, Heather.
Oh, thank you. I love the love.
Absolutely brilliant comments coming back. You've obviously inspired and given inspiration to people who are going to go away from this, I'm sure, with things to do and things to explore. One question that somebody did ask is, on one of your slides is a multicolour wheel with lots of feelings in it. Mm-hmm. Is that a recognised tool that can be found somewhere? Is it one of your own, or?
Right, so this is, no, it's from a chap called Plutchik, Plutchik. And all it is a wheel of emotions. So all that is an ability for us to be able to name the emotion that we're feeling, as opposed to just going, I feel bad. We can actually look at all the range of negative emotions and actually name it. And that can support us with being able to manage our stress levels.
Brilliant. Well, I've got to say thank you, Stuart, for finding Heather, because, wow, what a session. This webinar has been recorded. It will be available in a few days' time once Ben, behind the scenes, has edited it, and he will be putting that on the IOSH YouTube channel. And I'm fairly sure we'll be emailing out some of the slide packs as well. Just a reminder to everybody, Heather's contacts are on the main screen. I'm sure if you have any particular questions or anything you'd like to ask directly, Heather would be more than happy to pick those up offline. On behalf of the Manchester North West District sections and branch, thank you very much, Heather. It's been inspiring. I've certainly picked a few things up, and I'll be having a rethink on a few things that I'm dealing with. And
thank you.
And thank you, Stuart, for putting this together. It's one of yours, is this?
This is one of mine, but I've got to thank Melissa Fazackley for leading me on to it.
Melissa!
So she was the one who started it all, and I just took over while she got busy, because these things happen, and that's how the team works, isn't it? One's from the other one, but plaudits go to Melissa for making the initial contact with yourself. And then me and Heather have just kept that going and made it work.
Yeah. Well, it's an absolute honour. I'm really, really delighted. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I've got a wingman who's just saved me an embarrassment and kept me out of trouble with Melissa. But thanks, Stuart. Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of the session. We'll see you on the next one. Good afternoon.